Hi boys and girls, and welcome back to another edition of Snack Time with a Dollop of Read Aloud. We're going to continue reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone by J.K. Rowling, with permission granted by Scholastic Book Publishing for me to be able to share this book with you. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to continue with our adventure, but if you remember, in our last chapter, in chapter, I believe it was 15, Harry and Neville and Hermione and Malfoy had to serve their detention in the Forbidden Forest. Now, the Forbidden Forest is filled with many fantastical beasts, like centaurs, which he met quite a few of, unicorns, which sadly they discovered an injured and then ultimately a deceased unicorn, and a mysteriously cloaked figure that, when he got near to Harry, he made the scar on his forehead burn. That night was not the only thing that they discovered that was unbelievable. The last unbelievable fact that they uncovered was, when they were back in the castle, they discovered that it wasn't really Snape who was after the Sorcerer's Stone. It was no other than he who must not be named, commonly known as Lord Voldemort. With that knowledge, Harry, who was getting tired of always getting into trouble, and they had just lost all those points for the House of Gryffindor, which meant they were now losing the House Cup race, he decided that he was going to play it safe. But once they discovered that it was really Voldemort who was trying to come back to life and get the Sorcerer's Stone, which will bring him immortality and fulfill his life again, or his life energy, he realized that he could no longer stay on the sidelines and watch. He was not going to be a bystander. So him and his two friends, that merry band of 3 kids, are going to decide, or have decided, to take on the challenge again. And that's where we pick up with chapter 16. And there's one more fantastic beast I forgot to mention that you'll encounter today. Not in the Forbidden Forest, but you will encounter one today. And that one is your friend and mine, Fluffy. That's right, Fluffy comes back because this chapter is called Through the Trap Door. So we know that Fluffy's been sitting on top of a trapdoor, but we haven't ventured inside the trapdoor because we haven't known how to tame Fluffy. Maybe we'll discover something in this chapter. All right, let's start reading. In the years to come, Harry would never quite remember how he managed to get through his exams when he half expected Voldemort to come bursting through the door at any moment. Yet the days crept by, and there could be no doubt that Fluffy was still very much alive and still locked behind the door. It was sweltering hot, especially in the large classrooms where they did their written papers. They had been given special new quills for the exams with an anti-cheating charm on them. They had practical exams as well. Professor Flitwick called them one by one into his class to see if they could make a pineapple tap dance across the desk. I would love to have seen that. Professor McGonagall watched them turn a mouse into a snuff box. A snuff box is a tiny little, it looks like almost like a little pill box that people used to keep their tobacco in for like pipes and stuff. Points were given for how pretty the snuff box was, but taken away if it had whiskers. Snape made them all nervous, breathing down their necks while they tried to remember how to make forgetfulness potions. Harry did the best he could, trying to ignore the stabbing pains in his forehead, which had been bothering him ever since his trip to the forest. Neville thought Harry had a bad case of exam nerves because Harry couldn't sleep, but the truth was, Harry kept being woken up by his old nightmare. Except now his old nightmare had a dark cloak figure in it with silver blood dripping from its mouth. Maybe it was because he hadn't seen what Harry had seen in the forest, or because they didn't have scars burning on their forehead, but Ron and Hermione didn't seem as worried about the Sorcerer's Stone as Harry. The idea of Voldemort certainly scared them, but he didn't keep visiting them in their dreams. And they were so busy with their studying that they didn't have time to fret about what Snape or anyone else might be up to. Their last exam was History of Magic, 1 hour of answering questions about batty old wizards who had inherited or who had invented self-stirring cauldrons, and they'd be free for the whole wonderful week until their exam results came out. When the ghost of Professor Binns told them to put down their quills and roll up their parchment, Harry couldn't help cheering with the rest of the class. "That was far easier than I thought it would be," said Hermione, as they joined the crowds flocking onto the sunny grounds. "I needn't have learned about the 1637 Werewolf Code of Conduct, or the uprising of Eldfrick the Eager." Hermione always liked to go through their exam papers afterward, but Ron said that made him feel ill, so they wandered down to the lake and flopped under a tree. The Weasley twins and Lee Jordan were tickling the tentacles of a giant squid which was basking in the warm shallows. "No more studying," Ron sighed happily, stretching out on the grass. "You could look more cheerful, Harry. We've got a week before we find out how badly we've done. There's no need to worry quite yet." Harry was rubbing his forehead. "I wish I knew what this meant," he burst out angrily. "My scar, it keeps burning. It's happened before, and it's happening more often." "Go to Madame Pomfrey," Hermione suggested. "I'm not ill. I think it's a warning. I think it means that danger is coming." Ron couldn't get worked up. It was too hot. "Harry, relax. Hermione's right. The stone's safe as long as Dumbledore's around. Anyway, we've never seen any proof that Snape's found out how to get past Fluffy. He nearly got his leg ripped off once. He's not in a hurry to try again. And Neville will play Quidditch for England before Hagrid even considers letting Dumbledore down." Harry nodded, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that there was something he had forgotten. Something very important. When he tried to explain this, Hermione said, "That's just the exams. I woke up last night and halfway through my transfiguration notes before I remembered that we'd already done that one." Harry was quite sure the unsettled feeling didn't have anything to do with his schoolwork. He watched an owl flutter towards the school across the bright blue sky, a note clamped in its beak. Hagrid was the only one who had sent him letters. Hagrid would never betray Dumbledore. Hagrid would never tell anyone how to get past Fluffy. Never. But Harry suddenly jumped to his feet. "Where are you going?" said Ron sleepily. "I've just thought of something," said Harry, and he turned white. "We've got to see Hagrid. Now." "Why?" whined Hermione, hurrying to keep up. "Don't you think it's a bit odd," said Harry, scrambling up the grassy slope, "that what Hagrid wants more than anything else is a dragon? And a stranger turns up who just happens to have an egg in his pocket? How many people do you know wandering around with dragon's eggs in their pocket? They're illegal. It's very dangerous to have one. Lucky that they just happened to find Hagrid. Don't you think that's strange? Why didn't I see this before?" "What are you talking about?" said Ron, but Harry, sprinting across the grounds towards the forest, didn't answer. Hagrid was sitting in an armchair outside his house. His trousers and sleeves were rolled up, and he was shelling peas into a large bowl. "Hello there," he said, smiling. "Finish your exams? Got time for a drink?" "Yes, please," said Ron, but Harry cut him off. "No, we're in a hurry, Hagrid. I've got to ask you something. You know that night you won Norbert? What did the stranger playing the cards look like?" "I don't know," said Hagrid casually. He wouldn't take his cloak off. He saw the three of them look stunned and raise their eyebrows. It's not unusual. You get a lot of funny folks in Hogshead. That's the pub down in the village. Might have been a dragon dealer. Mightn't he? I never saw his face. He kept his hood up the entire time. Harry sank down next to the bowl of peas. What did you talk about, Hagrid? Did you mention Hogwarts at all? Might have come up, said Hagrid, frowning as he tried to remember. Yeah. He asked what I did, and I told him I was a gameskeeper. He asked a little bit about the sort of creatures I looked after, and I told him. And I said what I'd always really wanted was a dragon. And then, I can't remember too well, because he kept buying me drinks. Let's see. Yeah. Then he said he happened to have a dragon egg. And that we could play cards for it if I wanted it. But he had to make sure that I could handle it. He didn't want me to take care of it or to take it if he knew I wasn't capable of it. So I told him about Fluffy. If I can take care of Fluffy, a dragon, a baby dragon at that, would be easy. And did he seem interested in Fluffy, Hagrid? Harry asked, trying to keep his voice calm. Well, yeah. How many three-headed dogs have you come across? Especially when there's one in Hogwarts, so close. So I told him, Fluffy's a piece of cake if you know how to calm him down. You just need to play him a bit of music and he'll go right off to sleep. Hagrid suddenly looked horrified. Oh, I shouldn't have told you that, he said. Forget it. Hey, where are you going? Harry, Ron, and Hermione didn't speak to each other at all until they came to a halt in the entrance hall, which seemed cold and gloomy after being outside. We've got to get to Dumbledore, said Harry. Hagrid told the stranger how to get past Fluffy. It was either Snape or Voldemort under that cloak. It must have been easy once they had gotten Hagrid drunk. I just hope Dumbledore believes us. Firenze might be able to back us up if we need it to, or if Bane doesn't stop him. Where's Dumbledore's office? They looked around as if hoping to see a sign pointing them in the right direction. They had never been told where Dumbledore lived, nor did they know anyone who had been sent to see him. Well, we'll just have to, Harry began, and a voice suddenly rang out across the hall. What are you three doing inside? It was Professor McGonagall, carrying a large pile of books. We want to see Professor Dumbledore, said Hermione, rather bravely, Harry and Ron thought. See Professor Dumbledore? Professor McGonagall repeated, as though this was a very fishy thing to want to do. Why? Harry swallowed. Now what? It's sort of a secret, Professor, he said, but he wished at once he hadn't, because Professor McGonagall's nostrils just flared. Professor Dumbledore left about 10 minutes ago, she said coolly. He received an urgent hour from the Ministry of Magic, and he flew to London at once. He's gone? Now? Harry responded frantically. Professor Dumbledore is a great wizard, Potter. He has many demands on his time. But this is important. Something you have to say is more important than Ministry magic, Potter? Look, said Harry, throwing caution to the winds. Professor, this is about the Sorcerer's Stone. Whatever Professor McGonagall had expected, it wasn't that. The book she was carrying tumbled out of her arms and onto the floor. How do you know? She spluttered. Professor, I think I know that someone was going to try and steal the stone, and I've got to talk to Professor Dumbledore. She eyed him with a mixture of shock and suspicion. Professor Dumbledore will be back tomorrow. I don't know how you found out about the stone, but rest assured, no one can steal it. It's too well protected. But Professor Potter, I know what I'm talking about, she answered hotly. She bent down and gathered up her fallen books. I suggest you all go back outside and enjoy the sunshine." But they didn't. "It's tonight," said Harry, once he was sure Professor McGonagall was out of earshot. "Snape's going through the trap door tonight. He's found out everything he needs to, and now he's got Dumbledore out of the way. He sent that note. I bet the Ministry of Magic will get a real shock when Dumbledore shows up for absolutely no reason." "But what can we—" Hermione gasped. Ron and Harry wheeled around. Snape was standing there. "Good afternoon," he said smoothly. They stared at him. "You shouldn't be inside on a day like this," he said with an odd, twisted smile. "We were," Harry began without any idea what he was going to say. "You want to be more careful," said Snape. "Hanging around like this, people will think you're up to something. And Gryffindor can't really afford to lose any more points, now can it?" Harry flushed. They turned to go outside, but Snape called them back. "Be warned, Potter. Any more night wanderings, and I will personally make sure you get expelled. Good day to you." He strode off in the direction of the staff room. Out on the stone steps, Harry turned to the others. "Right. Here's what we have to do," he whispered urgently. "One of us has to keep an eye on Snape. Wait outside the staff room and follow him if he leaves it. Hermione, you better do that." "Why me? It's obvious," said Ron. "You can pretend to be waiting for Professor Flitwick. You know," he put on a high voice. "Oh, Professor Flitwick, I was so worried. I think I got number 14B wrong." "Oh, shut up," said Hermione, but she agreed to go and watch out for Snape. "And we'd better stay outside the third-floor corridor," Harry told Ron. "Come on." But that part of the plan didn't work. No sooner had they reached the door separating Fluffy from the rest of the school than Professor McGonagall turned up again, and this time she lost her temper. "I suppose you think you're harder to get past than a pack of enchantments," she stormed. "Enough of this nonsense. If I hear you two have come anywhere near this door, and I will take another 50 points from Gryffindor. Yes, Weasley, from my own house." Harry and Ron went back to the common room. Harry had just said, "At least Hermione's on Snape's tail," when the portrait of the fat lady swung open and Hermione came stalking in. "I'm so sorry, Harry. Snape came out and asked me what I was doing. I said I was waiting for Professor Flitwick, and Snape went to get him, and I only just got away. I don't know where Snape went." "Well, that's it, isn't it?" said Harry. The other two stared at him. He was pale and his eyes were glittering. I'm going out of here tonight, and I'm going to try and get the stone first." "You're mad," said Ron. "You can't," said Hermione. "After what McGonagall and Snape have said, you'll be expelled for sure." "So what?" Harry shouted. "Do you understand? If Snape gets a hold of the stone, Voldemort's coming back. Haven't you heard what it's like when he was trying to take over? There won't be any Hogwarts to get expelled from. He'll flatten it. We're turning into a school for the dark arts. Losing points doesn't matter anymore, can't you see? Do y'all think he'll leave you and your families alone if Gryffindor wins the House Cup? If I get caught before I can get to the stone, well, I'll go back to the Dursleys and wait for Voldemort to just find me there. It's only dying a little bit later than I would have, because I'm never going over to the dark side. I'm going through that trapdoor tonight, and nothing you two say will stop me. Voldemort killed my parents, remember?" He glared at them. "You're right, Hermione. You're right, Harry," said Hermione in a small voice. "I'll use the invisibility cloak. It's just lucky I got it back." "But will it cover all three of us?" said Ron. All three of us? Oh, come off it. You don't think you'll be going alone, do you?" "Of course not," said Hermione briskly. "How do you think you'd get to the stone without us?" I'd better go and look through my books. There might be something useful. But if we get caught, you two will be expelled too. Not if I can help it, said Hermione. Flitwick told me in secret that I got 112% on my exam. They're not throwing me out after that. After dinner, the three of them sat nervously apart in the common room. Nobody bothered them. None of the Gryffindors had anything to say to Harry anymore after all. This was the first night he hadn't been upset by it. Hermione was skimming through her notes, hoping to come across one of the enchantments they were about to try to break. Harry and Ron didn't talk much. Both of them were thinking about what they were about to do. Better get the cloak, Ron muttered, as Lee Jordan finally left, stretching and yawning. Harry ran upstairs to their dark dormitory. He pulled out the cloak, and then his eyes fell on the flute Hagrid had given him for Christmas. He pocketed it to use on Fluffy. He didn't much feel like singing. He ran back down to the common room. We'd better put on the cloak here and make sure it covers all three of us. If Filch spots one of our feet wandering along on its own. What are you doing? Said a voice from the corner of the room. Neville appeared from behind an armchair, clutching Trevor the Toad, who looked as though he had been making another bid for freedom. Nothing, Neville, nothing, said Harry, hurriedly pointing towards the cloak behind his back. Neville stared at their guilty faces. You're going out again, aren't you? No, said Hermione. We're not. Why don't you go back to bed, Neville? Harry looked at the grandfather clock by the door. They couldn't afford to waste one more moment. Snape might even be playing Fluffy to sleep. You can't go out. You'll get caught again, and you'll cost Gryffindor more points. You don't understand, said Harry. This is very important, but Neville was clearly steeling himself to do something desperate. I won't let you, he said, hurrying to stand in front of the portrait hole. I'll fight you. Neville, Ron exploded. Get out of the way from the hole. Don't be an idiot. Don't you call me an idiot, said Neville. I don't think you should be breaking any more rules. And you were the one who told me to stand up to people. Yes, said Ron, but not to us. Neville, you don't know what you're doing. He took a step forward, and Neville dropped Trevor the Toad, who leapt quickly out of sight. Go on, then. Try it. Try and hit me, Neville said, raising his fists. I'm ready. Harry turned to Hermione. Do something. Hermione stepped forward. Neville, I want to say that I'm really, really sorry about this. She raised her wand. Petrificus totalis. She cried, pointing it at Neville. Neville's arms snapped to his sides and his legs sprang together. His whole body went rigid. He stayed where he stood and then fell flat on his face, stiff as a board. Hermione ran to turn him over. Neville's jaw was jammed together so he couldn't speak. Only his eyes were moving, looking about in total horror. What have you done to him? Harry whispered. It's a full body bind, said Hermione miserably. Oh, Neville, do know that I am truly, truly sorry. We had to, Neville. We had no time to explain, said Harry. You'll understand later, Neville, said Ron, as they stepped over him and pulled on the invisibility cloak. But leaving Neville lying motionless on the floor didn't feel like a very good omen. In their nervous state, every statue's shadow seemed like Filch was following them. Every distant breath sounded like wind from Peeves swooping down around them. At the foot of the first set of stairs, they spotted Mrs. Norris skulking near the top. Oh, let's kick her. Just once, Ron whispered in Harry's ear, but Harry shook his head. As they climbed carefully around her, Mrs. Norris turned her lamp-like eyes onto them, but didn't do anything. They didn't meet anyone else until they reached the staircase to the third floor. Peeves was bobbing halfway up, loosening the carpet so that people would trip. Who's there? He said suddenly as they climbed toward him. He narrowed his wicked black eyes. No, you're there, even if I can't see you. Are you a ghoulie or a ghosty or a wee student beastie? He rose up in the air and floated there, squinting at them. Should I call Filch? I should, if something's creeping around unseen. Harry had a sudden idea. Peeves, he said in a hoarse whisper. The Bloody Baron had his own reason for being invisible. Peeves almost fell out of the air in shock. He caught himself in time and hovered about a foot off the stairs. So sorry, Your Bloodiness, Mr. Baron, sir, he said greasily. My mistake. I didn't see you, of course. I didn't. You're invisible. Forgive old Peevesy for his little joke, sir. I have business here, Peeves. Stay away from this place tonight. I will, sir. I most certainly will, said Peeves, rising up in the air again. Hope your business goes well, Baron, sir. I will not bother you. And he scooted off. Brilliant, Harry, whispered Ron. A few seconds later, they were there, outside the third-floor corridor, and the door was already ajar. Ajar means slightly open. Well, there you are, Harry said quietly. Snape's already gotten past Fluffy. Seeing the door open somehow seemed to impress upon all three of them what they were facing. Underneath the cloak, Harry turned to the other two. If you want to go back, I won't blame you, he said. You can take the cloak. I won't need it now. Don't be stupid, said Ron. We're coming, said Hermione. Harry pushed the door open, and the door creaked. Low, rumbling growls met their ear. All three of the dogs' noses sniffed madly in their direction, even though it couldn't see them. What's at its feet? Said Ron, or whispered Hermione. It looks like a harp, said Ron. Snape must have left it there. It must wake up the moment you stop playing, said Harry. Well, here goes. He put Hagrid's flute to his lips and blew. It wasn't really a tune, but from the first note the beast's eyes began to droop. Harry hardly drew breath. Slowly the dog's growls ceased. It tottered on its paws, and it fell to its knees. Then it slumped to the ground, fast asleep. Keep playing, Ron warned Harry, as they slipped out of the cloak and crept towards the trapdoor. They could feel the dog's hot, smelly breath as they approached its giant heads. I think we'll be able to pull the door open, said Ron, peering over the dog's back. Want to go first, Hermione? No, I don't. All right, Ron gritted his teeth and stepped carefully over the dog's legs. He bent and pulled the ring of the trapdoor, which sprung open. What do you see? Hermione asked anxiously. Nothing. Just black. There's no way of climbing down. We'll just have to drop. Harry, who was still playing the flute, waved at Ron to get his attention and pointed at himself. You want to go first? Are you sure? Said Ron. I don't know how deep this thing goes. Give the flute to Hermione so she can keep him asleep. Harry handed the flute over. In a few seconds of silence, the dog growled and twitched, but the moment Hermione began to play, it fell back into a deep sleep. Harry climbed over it and looked down through the trapdoor. There was no sign of the bottom. He lowered himself through the hole until he was hanging on by his fingertips. Then he looked at Ron and said, If anything happens to me, don't follow. Go straight to the Allery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore, all right? Right, said Ron. See you in a minute, I hope. And Harry let go. Cold, damp air rushed past him as he fell. Down, 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 and thump. With a funny, muffled sort of thump, he landed on something soft. He felt around, his eyes not used to the gloom. It felt as though he was sitting on some sort of plant. It's okay, he called up to the light the size of a postage stamp, which was the open trapdoor. It's a soft landing. You can jump. Ron followed right away. He landed sprawled next to Harry. What's this stuff? were his first words. Dunno, some sort of plant. I suppose it's here to break the fall. Come on, Hermione. The distant music stopped. There was the loud bark from the dog, but Hermione had already jumped. She landed on Harry's other side. We must be miles under the school, she said. Lucky the plant's down here, really. Lucky? Shrieked Hermione. Look at you both! She leapt up and struggled toward the damp wall. She had to struggle because the moment she landed, the plant started to twist, snake-like tendrils around her ankles. As for Harry and Ron, their legs had already been bound tightly in long creepers without them even noticing. Hermione had managed to free herself before the plant got a firm grip on her. Now she watched in horror as the two boys fought to pull the plant off of them. But the more they strained against it, the tighter and faster the plant wound around them. Stop moving, Hermione ordered them. I know what this is. It's Devil's Snare. Oh, I'm glad we know what it's called. That's a great help, snarled Ron, leaning back, trying to stop the plant from curling around his neck. Shut up! I'm trying to remember how to kill it, said Hermione. Well, hurry up! I can't breathe, Harry gasped, wrestling with it as it curled around his chest. Devil's Snare. What did Professor say about it? It likes the dark and the damp. So light a fire, Harry choked. Yes, of course, but there's no wood, Hermione said, wringing her hands. Have you gone mad? Ron bellowed. Are you a witch or not? Oh, right, said Hermione. She whipped out her wand, waved it, and muttered something, and sent a jet of the same bluebell flames she had used on Snape at the plant. In a matter of seconds, the two boys felt it loosen its grip as it cringed away from the light and the warmth. Wriggling and flailing, it unraveled around their bodies, and they were able to pull free. Lucky you pay attention in herbology, Hermione, said Harry, as he joined her by the wall, wiping the sweat from his face. Yeah, said Ron, and lucky Harry doesn't lose his head in a crisis. There's no wood, honestly. This way, said Harry, pointing down a stone passageway, which was the only way forward. All they could hear, apart from footsteps, was a gentle drip of water trickling down the walls. The passageway sloped downward, and Harry was reminded of Gringotts. With an unpleasant jolt of the heart, he remembered the dragon said to be guarding vaults in the Wizard's Bank. If they met a dragon, a full-grown dragon, Norbert had been bad enough. Can you hear something? Ron whispered. Harry listened. A soft rustling, clinking seemed to be up ahead. Do you think it's a ghost? I don't know. It sounds more like wings to me. There's light ahead, and I can see something moving. They reached the end of the passageway and saw before them a brilliantly lit chamber, its ceilings arching high above them. It was full of small, jewel-bright birds, fluttering and tumbling all around them. On the opposite side of a chamber was a very heavy-looking wooden door. Do you think they'll attack us if we cross the room? Probably, said Harry. They don't look vicious, but I suppose if they all swoop down at once, well, there's no choice. I'll run. He took a deep breath, covered his face with his arms, and sprinted across the room. He expected to feel sharp beaks and claws tearing at him in any second, but nothing happened. He reached the door untouched. He pulled the handle, but it was locked. The other two followed him. They tugged and heaved at the door, but it wouldn't budge. Even when Hermione tried the Alohomora charm, nothing worked. Now what? Said Ron. These birds, they can't just be here for decoration, said Hermione. They watched the birds soaring overhead, glittering. Glittering? They're not birds, Harry said suddenly. They're keys, winged keys. Look carefully. So that must mean, he looked around, the chamber, while the other two squirmed up at the flock of keys. Yes, look, broomsticks. We've got to catch the key to the door. But there are hundreds of them. Ron examined the lock on the door. We're looking for a big old-fashioned one, probably silver like the handle. They seized a broomstick and kicked off into the air, soaring into the midst of the cloud of keys. They grabbed and snatched, but the bewitched key darted and dived so quickly it was almost impossible to catch one. Not for nothing, thought Harry. Harry was the youngest seeker in the century. He had a knack for spotting things that others didn't. After a minute's heaving about through the whirl of rainbow feathers, he noticed a large silver key that had a bent wing, as if someone had already caught it and used it. That one, he called to the others. That big one there. There, with bright wings. The feathers are all crumpled on one side. Ron went speeding in the direction that Harry was pointing, crashed into the ceiling, and nearly fell off the broom. We've got to close in on it, Harry called, not taking his eyes off the key with the damaged wing. Ron, you come at it from above. Hermione, stay below and stop it from going down, and I'll try to catch it. Right now. Ron dived. Hermione rocketed upward, and the key dodged them both, and Harry streaked after it. It sped towards the wall. Harry leaned forward with a nasty crunching noise, pinned it against the stone with one hand. Ron and Hermione's cheers echoed around the high chamber. They landed quickly, and Harry ran to the door, key struggling in his hand. He rammed it into the lock and turned it. It worked. The moment the lock had clicked, the key took flight again, looking very battered now that it had been caught twice. Ready? Harry asked as the other two, his hand on the door handle. They nodded. He pulled the door open. The next chamber was so dark they couldn't see anything at all. But as they stepped into it, light suddenly flooded to the room to reveal an astonishing sight. They were standing on the edge of a huge chessboard, behind the black chessmen. They were all taller than they were, and carved from what looked like black stone. Facing them, way across the chamber, were the white pieces. Harry, Ron, and Hermione shivered slightly. The towering white chessmen had no faces. Now what are we to do? Harry whispered. It's obvious, isn't it? We have to play our way across the room. Behind the white pieces, they could see another door. How? Said Hermione nervously. I think, said Ron, we're going to have to be the chessmen. He walked up to the Black Knight and put his hand out to touch the knight's horse. At once, the stone sprang to life. The horse pawed the ground, and the knight turned his helmeted head to look down at Ron. Do we, have to go to join to get across the board? The Black Knight nodded. Ron turned to the other two. This needs thinking about, he said. I suppose we've got to take the place of 3 of the black pieces. Harry and Hermione stayed quiet, watching Ron think. Finally, he said, Now, don't be offended or anything, but neither of you are very good at chess. We're not offended, said Harry quickly. Just tell us what to do. Well, Harry, you take the place of that bishop, and Hermione, you go next to him instead of the castle. What about you? I'm going to be the knight, said Ron. The chessmen seemed to have been listening, because at once, at hearing these words, a bishop, a knight, and a castle turned their backs on the white pieces and walked off the board, leaving 3 empty squares that Harry, Ron, and Hermione took. White always plays first in chess, said Ron, peering across the board. Yes, look. A white pawn had moved forward 2 squares. Ron started to direct the black pieces. They moved silently wherever he sent them. Harry's knees were trembling. What if they lost? Harry moved diagonally 4 squares to the right. Their first real shock came when the other knight was taken. The white queen smashed him to the floor and dragged him off the board, where he lay quite still, face down. Had to let that happen, said Ron, looking shaken. Leaves you free to take that bishop, Hermione. Go on. Every time one of the men was lost, the white pieces showed no mercy. Soon they were a huddle of limp black players slumped against the wall. Twice Ron only just noticed in time that Harry and Hermione were in danger. He himself darted around the board, taking almost as many white pieces as they had black ones. We're nearly there, he muttered. Let me think. Let me think. The white queen turned her blank face toward him. Yes, said Ron. It's the only way. I've got to be taken. No! Harry and Ron shouted. That's chess, snapped Ron. You've got to make some sacrifices. I take 1 step forward and she'll take me. That leaves you free to checkmate the king, Ron, or Harry. But do you want to stop Snape or not? Ron, look, If we don't hurry up, he'll already get the stone. There was no alternative. Ready, Ron called, his face pale but determined. Here I go. Now don't hang around once you've won. He stepped forward, and the White Queen pounced. She struck Ron hard across the head with her stone arm. He crashed to the floor. Hermione screamed but stayed on her square. The White Queen dragged Ron to one side. He looked as if he had been knocked out. Shaking, Harry moved 3 spaces to the left. The White King took off his crown and threw it at Harry's feet. They had won. The chessmen parted and bowed, leaving the door ahead of them clear. With one last desperate look at Ron, Harry and Hermione charged through the door and up the next passageway. What if he'll be all right, said Harry, trying to convince himself. What do you reckon's next? We've had Sprouts. That was Devil's Snare. Flitwick must have been the charms on the keys. McGonagall transfigured the chessmen to make them alive. That leaves Quirrell's spell and Snape's. They had reached another door. All right, Harry whispered. Go on. Harry pushed it open. A disgusting smell filled their nostrils, making both of them pull their robes over their noses. Eyes watering, they sat flat on the floor in front of them. A troll even larger than the one they had tackled, out cold with a bumpy lump on his head. I'm glad we didn't have to fight that one, Harry whispered, as they stepped carefully over one massive leg. Come on, I can't breathe. He pulled open the next door, both of them hardly daring to look at what came next. But there was nothing very frightening in here, just a table of 7 differently shaped bottles standing on a line. Snape's! What do we have to do? They stepped over the threshold, and immediately a fire sprang up behind them in the doorway. It wasn't ordinary fire either, it was purple. At the same time, distant black flames shot up in the doorway, leaping onward. They were trapped. Look! Hermione seized a roll of paper lying next to the bottles. Harry looked over his shoulder. It read, Dangers lie before you, while safety lies behind. 2 of us will help you, whichever you would find. One among us 7 will let you move ahead. Another will transport the drinker back instead. 2 among our number hold only nettle wine. 3 of us are killers waiting hidden in the line. Choose unless you wish to stay here forevermore. To help you in your choice, we give you these clues 4. First, however slyly, the poison tries to hide. You will find some on nettle wine's left side. Second, different are those you stand on either end. But if you would move onward, neither is your friend. Third, as you see clearly, are all different size. Neither dwarf nor giant holds death in their insides. Fourth, the second left and the second right are twins once you taste them, though different at first sight. Hermione let out a sigh, and Harry, amazed, saw that she was smiling. The very last thing he thought about doing. Brilliant, said Hermione. This isn't magic, it's logic. A puzzle. A lot of great wizards haven't got an ounce of logic. They'd be stuck in here forever. But so will we, won't we? Of course not. Everything we need is right here on this paper. 7 bottles. 3 are poison, 2 are wine, 1 will get us safely through the black fire, and 1 will get us back through the purple. But how do we know which one to drink? Give me a minute. Hermione read the paper several times. Then she walked up and down the line of bottles, muttering to herself and pointing at them. At last she clapped her hands. Got it! The smallest bottle will get us through the black fire, towards the stone. Harry looked at the tiny bottle. There's only enough for 1 of us. That's hardly 1 swallow. They looked at each other. Which one will get you back through the purple flames? Hermione pointed at the round bottle at the right end. You drink that. No, said Harry. No, listen. Get back to Ron. Grab brooms from the flying key room. That'll get you out of the trap door, and fly past Fluffy. Go straight to the Allery and send Hedwig to Dumbledore. We need him. I might be able to hold Snape off for a while, but I'm no match for him, really. But Harry, what if you know who is with him? Well, I was lucky once, wasn't I? I might get lucky again. Hermione's lips trembled, and she suddenly dashed at Harry and threw her arms around him. Hermione! Harry, you're a great wizard, you know. I'm not as good as you, said Harry, very embarrassed as she let him go. Me? Books and cleverness. That's my most important thing. Friendships and bravery? Oh, Harry, be careful. You drink first, said Harry. You are sure which is which, aren't you? Positive, said Hermione. She took a long drink from the round bottle at the end and shuddered. It's not poison? Harry asked anxiously. No, but it's like ice. Go, quick, before it wears off. Good luck. Take care. Go! Hermione turned and walked straight through the purple fire. Harry took a deep breath and picked up the smallest bottle. He turned to face the black flames. Here I come, he said. He drained the little bottle in one gulp. It was indeed as ice flooded through his body. He pulled the bottle down and walked forward. He braced himself. He saw the black flames licking his body, but couldn't feel them. For a moment, he didn't see anything but dark fire. Then he was on the other side in the last chamber. There was already someone there. It wasn't Snape. It wasn't even Voldemort. All right, boys and girls, that was a very long chapter. So I hope you have a lot to think about. Harry, Ron, and Hermione completed those amazing tasks through teamwork, through working together. And now we find Harry by himself with the hopes that Ron and Hermione can get an owl to Dumbledore in time. You will have to tune in tomorrow for our very exciting final chapter of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. Since this was such a long chapter, I'm not going to leave you with any thoughts, but if you would like to share comments on who you think is the other person that's not Voldemort, that's not Snape, that was waiting for Harry, I would love to see your guesses in the comments section below. Until then, I'll see you tomorrow at our class share, and I'll can't wait to hear your reactions. All right, I miss you, I love you, and I hope you stay safe. Bye, my kids.